Good morning. I think we could all agree that the end of the world has kind of fascinated humanity since the beginning of the world. We've always kind of looked up to the stars and looked into our world and wondered, when is this all going to end? Well, in the 1970s, British comedians, they did a skit on Broadway that presented a group of followers assembled on a windy mountaintop awaiting the end, which according to a very ancient scroll, was about to happen in 2 minutes. So they counted down, and at 0 chanted, "Now is the end, perish the world." But nothing happened. So the leader, he shrugs his shoulders and says, "Never mind, lads, same time tomorrow, we'll get a winner one day." Well, some of the stories in the Bible, they read like science fiction and like a horror drama. The apocalyptic literature, such as the book of Daniel that we heard in our first reading, and even the images that Jesus presents in our gospel, we read how the sun and the moon darken, the stars are falling out of the sky, and the very powers in the heavens are shaken at their core. And we can interpret this like with fear. We can look at this as with great trepidation and anxiety. But it's interesting because as soon as Jesus kind of describes that end, he uses a parable, I think, to really set the tone. And he talks about, look at the fig tree, and how the fig tree, when the summer is coming, the leaves start to sprout and the wood gets soft and tender. What he's pointing to is that we shouldn't have fear. That in fact, that long-awaited encounter signifies the meaning of a friend. The friend is the Lord. But again, authors over and over again, particularly our biblical authors, they use these images because at the same time, they're wanting us to relate to what's being said. And we know in the ancient world when Daniel was writing, they were having a really tough go at it. The Israelites were in exile. Everything was going wrong for them. They didn't have their own land. There was no security. There was immense stress and oppression, and they worried for their safety and the safety of their own children. So that's the context in which we receive our first reading, but also our gospel. People who find themselves in great anxiety and great doubt and great distress. Friends, they needed to know, like we do, that no matter what, even if the sun should cease to project its light, God will continue to be with them. You see, the point of the biblical stories that now lead us towards Lent is to bolster our faith when our faith is threatened. These readings are meant to remind us that God is with us in our day, in our troubled world, and we are to act in faith as though every day were our last. Yet, though God never leaves us, who of us hasn't experienced times when we don't feel God's presence? Right? Like a microcosm of the end times described in our gospel, we have regular experiences of dark days filled with tribulation, right? The work that's piling up on our desk, the unrelenting household chores, family responsibilities, financial worries, psychic funks, catastrophic events, pressures that we find it hard to live up to, anxieties, the list goes on, illness, death. It's hard to think that these days that we haven't experienced moments in our lives where we feel like the world is about to end. And that's where our message today is so important and relevant for us in our lives. It's interesting in today's gospel. So Jesus is on the precipice of his life. He is literally like days away from his crucifixion. And he knows it. So he's trying to give his disciples some spiritual juice. He's trying to prepare them not only for his departure, but for their spiritual survival. Jesus knows really well what's about to happen, not only to him, but to his followers. Some of his disciples, he knows, are going to stay busy and they're going to stay focused. They're going to put what they've learned and experienced, they're going to put it to great use, not only for themselves, but for the world. But he also knows that there are those of his followers who are going to forget. They're going to forget what they've learned, what they've experienced, and they're going to withdraw from their faith and just become indifferent. Essentially, friends, Jesus' message to his disciples was both a warning and a comfort. Don't let go of faith, because God is with you. Friends, perhaps one of the greatest benefits of our faith in God is that even in the times when we don't feel God's presence, we still have the confidence to continue with our functioning in life, despite our uncertainties. Faith is the direction that we have when we can't see where we need to go. We will all go through times of confusion, many times over. But the worst thing we can do at such times is to jettison, to let go of our faith. For it is in putting our faith to good use that we're most likely to hear God's footsteps and to see his presence and to know that all will be well. Friends, faith in God is a gift that each of us have been entrusted with. But do we want it to grow? Do we see it as important? Important enough to protect and important enough to share? You see, the truth of the matter is that too many of us, we bury our faith. We bury it not only in our lives, but in our... We say, it's my faith. I don't want to share it. I don't want people to know about it. I'm afraid to talk to people about it. Here's a good one. I don't know enough about my faith to share it with others. And who wants to hear from me anyway? And by the way, my faith is my private concern and no one else's. Friends, if that's what we do, if that's what we really believe, then of course our faith will diminish. And then it'll just disintegrate right before our eyes. Why? Because the spiritual dynamic of faith is paradoxical. Here's how it works with faith. If you want your faith to grow, you have to share it. If you want your faith to be strengthened, you have to give it away. You have to speak it. You have to let others see it. You have to act out on it. Give it away. It's risky business, but that's exactly where Jesus is getting at with the apocalyptic imagery. It's meant to shake us. He's shaking us, waking us up, saying you never know when the end is going to come. This is a particularly important message for parents who feel that they're equipped to nurture their children in the faith. Inevitably, we feel like we don't know enough, we haven't experienced enough in order to share what we have with others, particularly our little ones. You know, often I hear parents say, I'm not well versed in my religion. I don't know enough. And by the way, the people over there at church, they're in a better position to handle religious education than I am. And so they hide their experience of faith, thus weakening it not only for themselves, but for those around them. But in Jesus' view, it is putting what we have to good use that gives us reward. It's in sharing our faith that it grows. It's sharing with those that God has entrusted to us, our children, grandchildren, nieces and nephews, our neighbors, those around us. And here's the good news, by the way. You don't have to start with a lot. When is enough enough? the gospel, Jesus, he reminds us, all those who have more will be given, and they will have an abundance. So maybe you think your faith life and your knowledge is here. We'll start there. It's time for us to trust and to share. How? Well, here are a few things that I think can help bolster our faith and our ability to grow in confidence of our faith and to share it with others. So first is this. Let the language of the gospel be on your lips naturally. What I mean is this. In other words, get rid of the censor that keeps us, or the filter that keeps us making reference to God in our life, in our relationship. Say, God bless you. Say, what a beautiful day. Thank God. Man, I got a test today. God help me. I mean, you could tell a colleague at work how the homily this weekend was phenomenal and you learned so much and you can't wait to share it with others. Maybe. I mean, it's these small injections of faith in our language that can make a real impact, not only in our lives, but in the lives of those whom we encounter. How about this? Second, real easy, display a sign of faith on you, on your person. Why not include a sign of faith on your social media handle or a profile? Wear a cross and be prepared to share the story behind the cross, why you wear that cross. Hang a picture of a saint in your locker. Those are all great conversation starters. Also remind us of who it is we are and what we believe. Third, pray before meals. Pray before meals at home. Pray before meals when you're out in a restaurant or at school or at work. And I know it could feel awkward, but know this. More times than not, what you're doing is you're helping others to do the same. I remember when I was in the Army, my twin brother and I, we were both in our uniforms and we went out to lunch. And we sat in a table in the diner. We took off our hats, and before we ate, we both made the sign of the cross and we began to pray. Everyone around us just looked. They couldn't believe that uniformed soldiers were overtly praying. And they looked in admiration with a smile. And I can't help but imagine how that helped them in their just being visible. Lastly, why not make a commitment this Advent to focus on strengthening your faith and the faith that you love? Come to weekday Mass, maybe at 7:30 a.m. Pick 3. Go to confession. Here's a good one. Download the Hallow app. HALLOW. Phenomenal app. And you're able to do a personal prayer schedule. You can do litanies, rosaries, reflections. So easy now. Technology. I'm using it and it's phenomenal. How about this? Build an Advent wreath at home with your kids. Make a Jesse tree or an Advent calendar. Many of these things, by the way, we'll be providing for some of our families too. Friends, know this, in my experience, most people are generally interested in what we believe and when we believe it. You don't have to be a theologian to defend and articulate your faith. You have to be someone who practices it visibly. And that goes a long way. So friends, remember this spiritual lesson today. If you want God's purpose to grow in your life and the life of those around you, you have to give your faith away. You have to share it. There's no other way.